All right. Welcome, everybody. Hello. Thanks for joining us. We're going to kick off. Thanks for joining us for another episode of When Things Go Wrong, hosted by the GMP Collective. I'm David Vaillencourt, CEO and founder of the GMP Collective, your host and moderator for today, as usual. I'm thrilled to welcome everybody here to this month's edition. These webinars, as a reminder, are all for you guys. The goal of this and all of our webinars is to set the stage, give some context as to why, through sharing stories that folks can hopefully relate to regarding common issues in our industry, and using that as the framework and the basis to dive into some of the solutions, tangible, actionable things that you can take with you and incorporate into your business, into your operation, and into your everyday life to ensure patient safety, consumer safety, and an overall successful industry. We have a really exciting episode today. Today's really focused on an important tenet of total quality management. And the word quality, just to put that word out there, is something that to a lot of people can be nebulous and can be too bland and generic. Has a lot of different interpretations, but it's so core and fundamental to almost every industry, and it's fundamental to every good business practice. So with that, we're really going to use that concept of total quality management and good manufacturing practices that's lacking in a lot of the cannabis industry, because you can't test and inspect quality into a product. To bring some light to that today through stories and parallels from other industries. As we all know, compliance is a household name in cannabis. Most state marketplaces really focus on compliance, track and trace, testing final products, ensuring that products aren't diverted, but they miss the mark of consumer safety and health through quality and GMPs. And that's something we really want to bring to light today and share some stories. So with that said, I'd like to introduce my two panelists to discuss this conversation today. I'll let them come join. Let's kick it off. Emily Lopez, love to have you say hello and introduce yourself. Thanks for being here.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I'm Emily Lopez. I work for Cresco Labs. I'm the Quality Systems Director. I've been with in the cannabis industry now for about 2 years. Before that, I worked in the food industry and pharma industry for food for much longer. Food was about 14, 15 years, but I've been in quality now for, makes me feel old, about 21 years. So thank you again for having me.
Yeah, this is great, Emily. I'm excited to have you. And there's so many parallels that I know we're going to dive into that are common across all industries, not just this, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Awesome. And so with that, Kim Stuck, it's so exciting to have you on stage again. Really appreciate having you on. Introduce yourself.
Yeah, so my name is Kim Stuck. I'm the CEO and founder of Allay Consulting, which is a compliance consulting firm. We deal with state regulations, FDA, GMP, OSHA, kind of anything to do with consumer safety, food safety, and worker safety is kind of where we cover. So, that's my background essentially is in wholesale food and restaurant inspections. That's how I got into the industry. I actually was a regulator in Denver, Colorado for restaurants and wholesale food, and then decided to get involved in the cannabis industry because we had to regulate it. So I have a background in that. I've been in the industry since 2014, so it's been great.
This is great. So just a couple housekeeping items before I jump into the first question. We've got almost 30 attendees here, and folks that are watching online, of course, you can follow up with us and reach out with other questions. But again, this is for you guys. So bring questions to the table. I'll incorporate them throughout. Bring your burning questions. We've got two amazing experts on the hot seat. So use the Q&A function and throw them out there. So with that, Emily, I want to start with you. And Kim, you kind of alluded to this answer, so it's perfect that we go to Emily here first. Your background was in food safety, supplier qualification previously. As you mentioned, you've got, who's counting, but almost about 2 decades of experience. What drew you to the cannabis industry?
I think what drew me to it was the food industry is pretty mature. And so there's not much more other than what's already out there that can be changed. And so I was excited about the cannabis industry because it's so young and so, there's so many places that we can actually make our own mark. My dad actually started in the food industry about 45 years ago in quality. And so, I watched him as he was making his mark in food. And now when I was working there, it already had its standards and its regulations. And so now it was just me basically going through and still implementing what was already set. And so it's exciting that now we get to go in and make our mark in an industry that's so young. And so I think it's great for people who are, old, and people who are just getting out of college to be able to get into such a new market and be able to make their mark on an industry. And there's so much to do because it's such a young industry. And so this is where we get to kind of shine now. And who doesn't want to work in cannabis, right? It's fun. It's fun to be able to be in a new industry.
Seriously, well said. Yeah, I preach this quite a bit, but when you think about who's an expert, we're all coming from unique perspectives and, different industries and different backgrounds. And that's really what makes our opportunities so powerful. And, the value we bring to the table is by working together from those different perspectives to make a mark.
Absolutely.
And, building on that too, so as you dove into this fun, Wild West industry of the cannabis where, there is no playbook, the opportunity to create the mark and shape really exists, in ways that the food and pharma CPG world really doesn't have that opportunity. What was there like a biggest surprise to you transitioning in? What was like the biggest surprise or shock?
And it was funny because when I interviewed for this job, as I was interviewing, everyone I spoke to said, just remember, this isn't like food and pharma. There's not going to be, the regulations aren't there. So if you're stuck and you're big on regulations, this probably isn't the job for you. So just think hard on that. And they're right, they're not there. And so I think it's really important to make sure that when implementing new things, take it slow, realize these aren't going to happen overnight. And they're right, the regulations aren't there, it's state by state. So what works in one state where, a third party certification is required, and there are some set requirements, won't work in another state where that's not there. And some states are very relaxed on their regulations. Other states are very strict. And so it's very much a case by case basis, which can make it fun or make it very difficult, depending on how you want to look at it. Glass half full, it's fun. So.
Yeah, it's all about the lens you look at it through, right?
Right.
Got to make it fun.
Absolutely. You'll get too frustrated if you don't, but I think it's fun because it's so new. But I do think it's important to make sure that we start looking towards the future, because if when, not if, we do become federally regulated, we need to be ready for it. And far better to be further along in the process than to have to try to be ready within, whatever time frame they give us, a month or a year, because it's going to be a total culture shock.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that is so true. With that, Kim, so you've been at this since 2014 in the cannabis industry, right? And you were in, restaurant, inspections, et cetera, beforehand. So, what are some of the top, I don't want to say, different question than Emily in terms of what was the biggest surprise, but like, what was some of the biggest mistakes you've seen that you were just like, oh my God?
Well, there's a lot. Almost every week we have a new one that comes to our consistency meetings, because we, as a entire business, we all get together every week and talk about, hey, these are the things we've run into. How do we solve this? Because just as Emily said, there are not a really good set of regulations yet, right? There's not a lot of things. So you kind of have to do a risk-based analysis of every single client you have. We have to go in and look at every single procedure, and using our like microbiological, background and understanding how food safety works, you kind of have to look at each situation and say, is this a contamination risk? Is this not? I think that the biggest and most expensive issues that we run into are usually facility issues. If you build the facility and you don't know anything about food safety or anything about the FDA regulations, you might want to think about finding someone that does, just because if you don't put a hand sink in the right room, you can no longer produce in that room or package in that room, or, whatever you want to do. If you don't have a 3-compartment sink, if you don't have a, mop sink in the right area, if your bathrooms are not in the right area, all of those things are really big deal breakers. And so, building the facility from the beginning, knowing that everything is going to be okay and it can get, GMP certified or will be okay with the FDA and you won't get shut down, that to me helps my clients sleep better at night. I know that. Smaller things happen all the time, but many of the smaller issues we can fix, right? We can find a solve for them and say, hey, we'll just change the way we do this. We'll rewrite the SOP and train your staff to do it this way, and it's fine, whereas with the big facility issues, that's, if you don't have hot water, if you don't, those are the things that the FDA just will close you and move on with their day. So those are the ones we try to avoid the most.
Well, yeah, that actually reminds me back to the actual first episode we had of When Things Go Wrong, where and one of my favorite slides that I like to share is an image of they tore up the cement that had been poured. There were already walls, there was drywall up because of what you just described. They forgot about a triple sink and they didn't have the plumbing running there. It's like, that's an expensive oops. Yep, moving walls, adding plumbing, electrical lines are not things you can, fix with a cultural shift or retraining. Yep.
Yeah, and same with the ceilings, walls, floors. I mean, if you're not building it to the standard that it needs to be, super expensive. I mean, we have people that we'll do one audit for, and they go, never mind, we can't get GMP because we can't afford to do it yet because of our facility. Which is always so sad, but usually they come back, once they get things fixed up a little bit.
Yep. After a couple of hard OMGs. Yep. And so, building on that, as you've been in the industry for a while, have you seen improvements? Have you seen maybe, less folks make those types of mistakes or, things in quality, packaging rooms, et cetera? Is there hope?
Yes, there is a lot of hope. A lot of people in the industry they're very intelligent people, right? They are willing to take on challenges. They're willing to learn new things. That's what drew me to the industry in the first place. I could have had a cush government job for the rest of my life, but instead I decided to do this because it was so rewarding and I just love the industry and the people so much. And it helps that, I have that background with, certified professional of food safety, certified quality auditor, having that background helps me to look through a lens that they can't really look through. And it helps them, learn. The why is the most important thing. If they don't understand why they have to do something, they almost never will do it. And so we're really good at changing that culture within the company, making people excited about being compliant and have pride in their company and their business and their work. And that's really where we found things most effective. We have clients that literally went from like, this is a dangerous situation to, oh my gosh, they're crushing it. And they just passed that inspection with flying colors. And now they've got it, and that is, to me, that is like what I live for, is that transition from like, this is terrifying to holy cow, they are killing it. And I would eat off of their floor, like that's where I love to live for sure.
That is so refreshing and inspiring to hear. And I think that just points out that like, it is possible, right? Like it truly is possible with the right culture, the right attitude. And it's so exciting to see those aha moments, the light bulbs go off when you kind of change the narrative and folks really start to get it. With that, Emily, I want to go over to you. What have you, both in your role at Cresco in the cannabis industry, as well as obviously before with your couple decades, what are some of the hardest things you've seen that you've had to face as that role of a quality director, where you're not the outside person like Kim that gets to come in and like shift the culture? You're in the throes of it. You're responsible every day and part of the team.
I think the good thing about the cannabis industry versus some of the other industries is that for most of the employees that I've worked with in this industry, this isn't just a job. This is their passion. So that's made my job so easy because I don't see that as much working in, with some people in the food industry, that's absolutely the case, obviously, but it is not that case. In cannabis, this is the passion. They absolutely live and die for what they're doing, and they care about it so much. So that makes it so easy. And so, a lot of what they're doing that maybe isn't quite right isn't because it's malicious or they're trying to do anything bad. It's because they're trying to do the right thing. And maybe they just don't realize the reason why we have to do something a different way. And so I think one of the biggest things that we're working on right now is really document control. And, for example, we have a really great document control team, and they're passionate about what they do. They want to make sure everything is right, and they do an awesome job. And then we get down to the sites who are really passionate about what they do. They want to make things right. And so if they develop a usually form, it might not make it up to the document team. And so it's trying to explain to them why it's so important that their forms that are excellent make it up to the document team. Because, number one, they just need to be controlled. And number two, these forms can be used at so many other sites, because why recreate the wheel if somebody's developed something that's so good that can be used someplace else? It could be of a benefit to other sites as well. And, I'm trying to really make sure, and so are our other quality directors, that they really understand the purpose behind document control and why it's so important and how we can share our knowledge across the broad spectrum. I think it's getting there. And it's not unique either to cannabis. So I see it everywhere I would go. When I used to do supplier and site audits, it was such low-hanging fruit that unless it was systematic, I used to not even write it up as a finding. It would be more of a conversation because, they know. And it was just, oh my gosh, I forgot to do that. So I think that's one of the biggest things that we're kind of struggling with this year. And so 2023 is the back to the basics year for us.
Man, every time I get to talk to you, Emily, you really inspire me and give this such a important positive lens to it. I think a couple of things you just mentioned there of the passion is so true. I think we all see that in the industry, and it's exciting because folks are malleable. You probably hear, is it fair to say you hear less than maybe you did in the food industry? Well, that's how we've always done it. Those horrible words, because there is no, here's how we've done it. We're doing it now. And I think I wrote a note down as you were talking because I was really inspired by a thought there. You were talking about the forms and little things like that. It's exciting to give folks credit where credit is due is something I like to talk about a lot. So it's you made that great form. Awesome. First, it's great. Second, share it. Let's make sure you get credit and it's in a controlled environment. And three, you get to leave your mark on, we get to bring this to the next site.
Absolutely.
The value of that for folks to feel like they're a part of something bigger, I think is pretty important to be able to communicate too. So, I want to, we've got a few good questions coming in, but I want to go to Kim first. And I want to ask you your perspectives on top management. And actually one of the people who has their hand raised is something that I know is near and dear to their heart. But with the implementations that you've done, and I'm sure you and I both have clients where we don't take on every client because not everybody's a perfect fit, and has the cultural and the willingness and the resources to do it right and to be in the right place. And so with that, I want to get any perspectives you have on top management support. Are there common objections you see that you've encountered over the years in facing? Look, we've got to do this.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, with any kind of change in the world, there's some people that just don't want that to happen, right? And there's always going to be objections. Many times, I think people go into getting, and I'm just going to talk about GMP certification right now, because that is like probably our biggest thing we do right now, because it's kind of the only set of regulations to really follow other than, your local and state. But with GMP, we run into a lot of people that they don't really realize how big of an ask it is. It's a lot. Like, owners will be like, yeah, just get GMP in 3 months. And I'm like, whoa, that's not going to happen. Like, thank you for like your enthusiasm, but I don't think you understand how much work and effort and how everybody in your entire company has to be involved in this and be okay with it and be happy with it. Because if one person, one employee has decided not to do these forms or not to follow this SOP or whatever it might be, or their training isn't good enough, then you can't get GMP certified, right? You get docked for that. So having everybody on board is always really good. Upper management has to absolutely be involved. We've had many a compliance officer reach out to us and say, hey, I really want GMP certification. We'd love to work with you guys. How do we get involved? And they're like, I'll just sign the contract and do it. And I said, no, I need to talk to the owner and make sure the owner is really on board with this and really does want this, because they might have the money to do it. But if we don't have that upper management pushing everybody to be compliant, then it almost always doesn't get done, right? That those people have to be the ones that are saying, yes, this is a company-wide thing that we want to do, and implementing these things that, everybody has to be on board. And a lot of times it sucks when we go in because, there are sometimes lower level people who are just like, we're not doing that. We're, kind of the same thing. They've been in business for 10, 15 years, some of our clients, and they're like, we're not doing that because that's ridiculous. And, we get pushed back there sometimes. And unfortunately that leads to, people cleaning house and all kinds of like things that are just not fun. So when the management is on board and the owner is on board and can kind of like talk to people about the importance and understanding, we get a lot better returns from that. Absolutely. Yeah.
A lot easier to get traction with that. Emily, I'm curious your thoughts on that, and in the role of your lens, in the lens of your role, rather, your day to day, you're having to, ensure that production and operation staff that's not a direct report to you is adhering to these requirements, and you need that support of senior management. So share your experience on how important that is, good, bad, and ugly.
I think in my earlier days in my career, I've made the mistakes of saying, I'm in quality. I can remember my very first job. I came in and I was tasked with getting the company ISO 9001 certified. And I came in, I had my new degree, and I was all set to do this because I knew best how to write these work instructions. And so I did it all by myself in my little tunnel. And you can imagine how well that went over. And so now that was a really good learning experience for me. You can't do it in your own little bubble. You need to involve everybody with doing all of this work. And so now it's a collaborative effort. And so whenever I'm going to a new facility or when I was a quality manager at another facility, it was very much a collaborative thing. So my HACCP teams it involved everyone from the senior director or senior manager or whoever it was that headed up the facility, and HR to maintenance to production, and the first thing I did when I would come on board is make friends with maintenance, because you need to have maintenance can be difficult sometimes. And so as long as I could get along with maintenance, And, the production people, but maintenance was the big one. It was home free. And so that was always how I would do all of my work and how I still do. I make sure that we involve everybody necessary. It was a total collaborative process. And, I think it's very important. Quality and operations can sometimes have a push-pull relationship. And so I think it's so important that its quality comes in and makes nice with operations, and not just fake nice. You really have to work with them, because we have our job, but they really have a lot of work to do too. And so it's really important to make sure that you or that I, as quality, understand the work that they're trying to do each day, and realize that while I'm still trying to get my work done, they have product to get out the door, and I can't be their hindrance to being able to produce product. So that's really how I do things, and how I really try to work with my teammates and my direct reports to get the job done as well.
I think you've challenged some of the, I'll hear this at times where it's like, oh, quality is like the police, they're the ones that are, coming with the sticks and, reprimanding folks. And it's like, you don't have a healthy culture in your operation.
Right.
It's like, you're not doing it right. That's not how you approach it.
Completely agree. And luckily I was able to have a really good mentor years ago at my second job. And she was the one who kind of trained me on how to be an effective quality employee. So I've kind of taken everything I learned from her, and I keep going with it.
Well, I want to ask and there's some really great questions. So I'm gonna shift in a second here to go over to the Q&A, but I actually want to ask you something that we didn't talk about, but I think you'll have a good answer regarding, there's kind of two misconceptions that at least I hear often. One, oh my God, I have to hire quality people, like that's going to cost me money. And, really pushing the idea that quality is an investment in the operation. It's not an expense. That, and, challenging the narrative that GMPs and quality systems are like impossible and are just going to cripple an operation. Would you be able to challenge that, Emily? What are your thoughts?
I think it's all in how it's rolled out. I think if you go in and you work with the teams to roll it out, and you do little bits at a time, and you don't go full force with it, I don't think it's an unnecessary expense. I also think you can challenge it by looking at your customer complaints before the rollout versus afterwards, because I've actually seen, the previous company I worked at had basic GMPs rolled out, and we had quite a few complaints. And we looked at it after we had our the full SQF compliance and certification. Our complaints actually went down because and the price of the complaints went down. I mean, we did have outliers, obviously, that's always going to happen, but for the most part, the complaints did go down, and the cost of the complaints went down because people were much more aware of what was going on and what the requirements were. And I think with ongoing training and more observance and ongoing GMP audits and regular process audits, and including the staff on the floor, not just having it be quality doing these audits. I think it's very important to also train your production staff and have them be auditors as well, so that they feel like they're part of the process. You can really see a shift in the culture. So that's where I think you can make an argument for the quality. And you don't have to have, and I know I'm probably saying something I maybe shouldn't, since this is a quality conference, or a quality talk, but you don't necessarily have to have a huge quality staff to do this. You need to have, obviously, a quality manager and a few people reporting under, but I always think it's a really good idea to include your production staff in your audit team. Let them be part of the process.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I mean, you work smart and you optimize how everybody's working together to create a culture of quality, and
Hmm.
you still have those firewalls with a quality unit and quality staff. But yeah, you don't have to have a huge quality team if you've got a really lean and or an optimized bought in production team that's really supporting that role.
Right, right. It's also a good way to build morale out there too. So, I had some great production employees who were part of the audit staff. They did really good audits.
Yeah, and we haven't even, I didn't plan to even dive into internal auditing, but I think you've just mentioned a few important topics. One, the internal auditing, and from my lens, what I've always liked to work with folks on is like whether it's the maintenance staff or janitors, like get the folks that have the freshest eyes involved. They're going to have some really good insights, and that's going to help you drive improvement. Tear the operation apart, drive improvement, and then have the KPIs, right? Have those key performance indicators. You're collecting that data. Customer complaints, what's the cost of the complaint, what's the size of the impact, how many, those decrease by what percent over time. That demonstrates the value right there, and that's what management that is responsible for that, and the success and profit of the company at the end of the day. Those are KPIs that allow them to sleep better at night.
Absolutely.
And so, geez, I want to go to. We've got so many good questions here. I'm worried we're never going to get to all of them. So there's a few here. I'll just kind of throw out and summarize and see if either of you whoever wants to take a first stab at it. Trying to organize them together. There's one that says, "How do you think the medical cannabis can be standardized?" With the example, of BRC, IFS, GFSI. Some SQF schemes. And I think that can maybe even relate into the other two questions here. So I'll just put them all out there. Asking for, in our opinion, what are the chances to make the plant comply with the strict regulations of pharmacopoeias? I think that all ties back into standardization. And then there was a reference of the modernization of the Cosmetic Act implication, for topicals. So theme here of, third-party certifications in like the food space. Can that quality standard framework exist? Can pharmacopoeias exist for the plant? And where do you see the Cosmetic Act coming in? Any thoughts? Anybody? I don't know, Kim, you want to jump in there?
I mean, so we're working in this really weird area where the FDA isn't really involved yet, and all that exists, but there are plenty of standardization companies that have put out standards that are, comparative to GMP, good manufacturing practices, which are based off of the FDA regulations, and that we work in. Me and David work in all the time. We're part of ASTM's like cannabis standards group. So there's an entire like nonprofit that has been working for the United States for over 100 years now, I think, for doing things for like aerospace and concrete and like all building code and all this stuff. And they have standards, and they, ISO and GMP and all of that. So they definitely exist, and they're out there if you want to follow any of those standards. FDA standards for 111 and 117, which is supplements and food ingredients. You can always follow those. I don't think that the FDA is going to reinvent the wheel on all of the things that are going to be required. So if you're already establishing these kinds of systems in your facility, you're going to be a lot better off now, later on when things are required. And the FDA did just kick it to Congress for Congress to tell them that they can write a set of standards, a new set of standards that are cannabis focused or hemp focused, really. And that's going to be, really interesting to see how long that'll take. So we are recommending to follow, GMPs that already exist right now, just to make sure that your product is safe, quality assurance. Just like Emily said, it improves morale, it improves employee turnover, it, makes your product a lot more expensive, right? If you want to sell your brand eventually, it's a great exit strategy to get those kinds of certifications and have those standards in place, because it's mitigating risk. You have less people getting sick, less consumer complaints, all of those things, and it looks really shiny, right? On your resume, if you will, on your company resume. So there's plenty of reasons to get it, and there are a whole lot of standards. You can get ISO 9001, ISO 22000, If you're in the hemp realm, you can get organic certification in your manufacturing or in your cultivation. You can get GACP in your cultivation facility, and that's THC as well. All of that we can do it all. And I can't even tell you how many times people call me and they say, hey, we want to get compliant with standards, FDA standards. We know we can't get GMP certification because we're not federal. And I'm like, no, that's a third-party company. The FDA doesn't give certifications. Those are third-party companies. So they can choose to work with anyone that they want, and they can give you certification. We have a bunch of companies that are in hemp, THC, and psilocybin out in Oregon that are getting GMP certification. So it's definitely possible. And I really think that this industry, I haven't met a company yet that I didn't think could do it.
I think that's really important. And sorry, Emily, I'm going to jump in for half a second and maybe you'll agree with this too, as for your answer, GMP is in, ISO 9001 is a quality system, right? That ISO 9001 has been around since I think 1987, has gone through iterations. It's foundational, from there, that's what formed, 22,000. You read pharmaceutical quality systems, ICHQ7, I know we're throwing out a bunch of acronyms to folks that may or may not be familiar in the audience, but regardless of which flavor of GMP, it's all the same foundations. And there's World Health Organization, the WHO has requirements for GMP. There's a framework for herbal medicines for GMP. So to address, can you have a strict pharmacopoeia? Well, there's I think at least 5 pharmacopoeias now. EU has one out for review. The US Pharmacopoeia's Herbal Medicines Compendium just put out for public review at the end of the year a monograph for cannabis and fluorescence, and we recognize it's a heterogeneous product, so there is variability in that tolerance of the active ingredients, the THC cannabinoids. So it's totally doable, and it's the only way that you ensure product safety and quality. So regardless of your flavor, it's doable. I think what you just said, Kim, is many people are doing it, have done it. I'll pause there, Emily. Go ahead.
Along with all of those, right now, because we're not federally regulated, SQF isn't available in the US. I believe it is in Canada, but I'm part of the CSQ Technical Advisory Committee. So that one is in the process of being benchmarked against GFSI. So it's not GFSI yet, but that is within the next year or two, we hope to have that part of GFSI. So, but that is acceptable for some certifications. We have a couple sites, or we have a site that's certified for CSQ, and there are a couple different schemes. You can get it for food manufacturing, regular quality, cultivation, and there are just a few. So but at least it gives you a standardization. So, and it's based a lot on SQF. It's very similar to SQF.
That's awesome. I can't wait until that happens.
Oh, me too.
It'll be so nice. But the good thing is that now cannabis has been around for long enough that we work with several accredited certifying bodies, if I can talk today. And there's even a couple that have a cannabis specific standard that our company helped write. So because there are different nuances in the cannabis space that don't exist in any other wholesale food manufacturing, obviously an extraction lab is very, very different than, someone who's just making brownies and things like that. So all of those have to be taken into consideration when writing a standard. And I'm just so happy that we have some of those companies that are doing and they include vape pens and flour and like all of the things, not just edibles, where some accredited certifying bodies can only do like this edible or a topical or, whatever. So it's pretty cool to like be around and see this, because back when I started the company in 2017, none of these certifications existed. We had to really like talk to a bunch of people. I think David did too, where we were like, come on, we got to get this together.
Help us.
Yeah. These products need to be safe, just like everything else. And that's really what it's all about, is the normalization of cannabis. We should be treated and regulated the exact same way as every other person on the planet, every other company. So.
And that actually, I forget which one of you brought that up, but you mentioned the word risk-based approach or risk-based analysis. And that's exactly what you just described there, Kim, right? Of like, you're producing, you're an extraction facility making like bulk crude and distillate. There are different risks there, and it also ties back to what's the final product. If you're making an inhalable product, a vape pen, that has different risks because of the route of administration than an edible, than a flower that you're combusting. Also, are you an immunocompromised person and a true medical patient? Different risks there than if it's just for the average adult recreational use consumer. And we have to, I encourage everybody to think about, the concept of risk and make it as simple as bring a few different people with, different perspectives and expertise at the table. Let's have Emily, Kim, and I sit around the table, bring in an engineer, we'll bring in, an industrial hygienist, and we'll just talk about a certain aspect of our operation, right? And we'll just brainstorm, right? Just throw things on the wall about what the risks are. And it's as simple as that type of conversation where you get a really valuable outcome of these are the things we need to look for. That's start there, right? And use that. And I can't acknowledge and appreciate enough what you just said there too, Kim, of like how appreciative we are to have these third-party companies, to have ASI with the CSQ framework, et cetera, to be actually engaging and supporting the industry with giving those independent third-party certifications, because that's the true test. I don't care what Kim says. Kim says her facility is so awesome. I want an independent person to validate and say, yeah, Kim's facility is actually, producing safe products. And those are important. I want to go to back earlier, we were talking about forms as an example, and two questions came up. So I want to go back to that. So that I'll read the two questions and then try to summarize it for us to answer. Do the forms relate to process methods to make sure steps are followed, or are they for data collection or something else? So maybe we're just talking a little bit about kind of forms in general and their value. And then the other one was regarding logging forms. Many are trying to move to digital forms. And clients are starting to use Google Docs and Sheets for tracking. Can the panel provide insight and things to think about when logging digitally? So I don't know if you want to break that down to two questions, Emily or Kim. Yeah.
Emily, you can go because I'm wondering what you guys use in yours, because we've switched to digital. A lot of our, we try to get people to use digital. Having a big binder of SOPs sometimes is just not, gonna.
We're switching over to digital as much as we can, mainly because we want to be able to track and trend as much as we possibly can, and to take the paper forms and then type it all into Excel, and that's just, nobody has time for that. And we're finding that it's so much easier to manage. And luckily we have a person in our on our quality team who's just a genius with all of this and with Excel. So he does a lot of that for us because I'm certainly not. So luckily he enjoys it. He's good at it. So we use him for a lot of it, and he's just amazing with it. As far as what we're using them for, and I hope I'm answering the question right. I can't remember exactly what the question was, but we are using forms for documenting, how what our manufacturing is. So a lot for traceability, because, God forbid something happens, we need to be able to trace back the lots of our ingredients and everything that was used in any product, as well as packaging. I'm trying to think what else. A lot of it's traceability, making sure that we document processes as they come up, where products are shipped, incoming materials, making sure that we document how they look coming in. Forms, we try to document anything that's important to the process, I guess. So, I'm not sure if I answered the question well enough, but.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, related to process methods, yes, right. Master batch records, anything that's critical to the process and the raw materials, inspection forms, receiving forms. And I like that you mentioned, the benefit of going digital makes it a lot easier to trend data, right? And that gives you more advanced warning signals of, hey, something's
Absolutely.
not operating up to snuff, or maybe there's an area you need to investigate before you have oh, how did this happen?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's a lot about liability, right? So if you are documenting everything, so this is coming from an ex-regulator, right? We never take anything at face value. You can tell us all day long that you do something a certain way until your face is blue. We don't care until you can prove it with that documentation. Like,
Right.
I'm asking questions, but if nothing is documented, then there is no proof that anything in your facility has gone through a quality assurance program or anything, or food safety program, and then therefore, if there's an issue, then that means everything in your facility could be contaminated, right? If there's something goes wrong and you don't have documentation that you checked everything before it went out the door and made sure that everything was safe to your best ability, then you could be held liable for anything that goes wrong, even if it's like not your fault or it was like a fluke, doesn't matter. Like, you have to have everything perfectly documented. I think going digital is the best way to do it. We do that with all of our clients. I mean, we can do whatever they want, but we do a lot of that documentation, so that they know how to update it. They can figure it out on their own when we leave that project, right? Because we come in and we help you through it. And then we're like, okay, we taught you everything we know. You should be able to go and do this on your own without having a complete breakdown of the system. And I think we've proved that really well that we can do that. So, and we kind of have to bend with the new technology that we have, right? Why would we resist that when it's so much better? And you can track trends and all of your, corrective actions and all that stuff. So, yeah, I think it's great. The documentation is like the biggest part of GMP. I really think that that's the hardest part to get under control. And it takes a long time to write all those documents. I mean, some of our food safety plans are 100-something pages, right? Depending on the company, because every company is different. But once they're in place and you know how to update them properly and you know how to fill them out and you get used to it, it's something that you'll just be able to do in your sleep after a while.
Yeah. And is it Deming who said, in God we trust, all else we need data, or something along those lines?
Totally.
and the trust but verify, and if it isn't documented, it didn't happen. I mean,
I say that all the time.
Gotta prove it. A follow-up question on that that I think kind of dives in a little bit deeper to some of the nuances of and the concerns around the digital side that I remember several years ago, this being like probably the biggest, I don't know, like boogeyman's unknown in the realm of like, for folks that are familiar in the pharmaceutical side with like Part 11, Annex 11 for digital, for management of digital data. So security and traceability, concerns around that, falsification of data. Is that anything to share about concerns with using digital records like Excel or Google Sheets that folks should be aware of? Do you see that as a concern?
Emily, have you ran into anything like that?
I haven't yet. I think it's something that we probably need to be aware of because, yes, it could happen. I remember when all of this started to roll out, this was about in 2009 when I was working for a company that worked with anhydrous dextrose that was used in saline bags. And we had to start validating all of our digital data. And I can't remember what the regulation was, but yes, I think it's something that we need to be aware of. I think we're probably a few years from having to really worry about that if it ever comes. It never really happened in the food industry, which I was always a little surprised about. But I think we just need to be aware of it. I think there are some data collection systems. They're not cheap, but like I forget what it's called.
C15.
Yes,
Yeah.
And Intellect and some of the other ones out there that will help with that. as opposed to the Google Forms and things like that, because, but, they're not cheap. Companies have to really invest in that kind of software. But I do think it needs to be on the radar.
Yeah, we have a few software companies that are cannabis specific, actually, that have built in GMP, actually worked with us to like build in GMP into their system so that everything is traced through that and then protected under that. And that has worked really well. But once again, just like Emily said, I mean, that is another cost, right? It's adding another thing to the list of things that you have to do and people you have to pay for GMP. But if you have a bigger company, if you have 3 people in your company, I've seen people very effectively use, Excel and keep track of everything. But when you get to a certain, point, like Emily's company, that's like really hard to manage, and you almost have to have some kind of software in place. And then, the falsification of documents and all that. I mean, I was a regulator back when we were doing recalls every week, and because of pesticide contamination and, and all this stuff. I mean, I literally would see people falsify handwritten ones like right in front of me. So it's like kind of one of those things. It's like, do we worry about this? Do we, at least in a computer system, you can tell when somebody's updated something, right? And you can tell, like, there are software programs where if somebody changes something in an SOP, it date marks it and tells you who it was. And that to me is enough, right? Like that's, I don't know. I feel like it's not that, I haven't seen it to the level that I've been concerned with my clients. My clients are pretty much on board and want to do the right thing. So I don't know. It's been good.
Well, I think, yeah. And when you think of like third-party certification too, I'll never forget getting trained first time is like, what stuck in my head is we're looking for conformance. You're looking for conformance. Show me how you meet the requirements, driving continuous improvement, that culture of, leading with those wins and positives versus coming in like, I don't trust you, lack of trust, I'm going to try to tear you apart. Certainly some auditors have that kind of mentality. You never know who you're going to get. But when you look at the biggest things to worry about at night, I think that's, tracking that data, documenting it is key to start with. And we're, food industry does not have a lot of strict controls over that. We're not pharma. Unless you are targeting a true pharmaceutical market, like in the EU, that's a different story. But yeah, I think we've covered that fairly well. I want to, you actually mentioned something, Kim, that relates to another question here. So I'm going to ask it regarding a small team of like, 3 people. So one of the questions was, would it be possible for a single sole proprietor in a small startup edibles business to achieve GMP certification? And, I think that relates to, having 100%. That world, but go ahead.
Yeah, 100%. We have like itty bitty companies and we have really massive companies that we work with. And the smaller companies are actually really easy to work with, and it's easier to get that certification because there's less people to train. You can implement everything, everybody's in the room, right? Everybody's in the same room when we're doing everything. And when you get started and you implement things early on in the company like that, when you expand, there's no surprises. There's no people who are like, well, why are we doing this? There's no bad habits to break. And so a lot of our, new startups, especially like in New York, who have to have GMP certification, they're, getting started, and we're working with them from the beginning. And it's actually really great because no matter what size you are, you can get it. It's just a matter of like how, and different SOPs will be longer or shorter, like, it takes a little time. But any size company can do it and should, for sure.
Yep. And I think the smallest company was a team of 5. I think we helped get GMP certified. And so,
we have a 3-person client right now, and it's awesome. Like, they're super on board and super excited about it. They were excited that they could get it because at first they didn't think they could. So, yeah.
That's awesome. So let me, we've got about 5 minutes left here, and I think we did a decent job at answering some of the questions here. We won't get to all of them, but I want to bring it back to where we were going earlier. And Emily, maybe not to get you totally onto your soapbox that I'm sure you can get on, but I think it's a really important one that I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about. So I want to throw it to you first. Talk about supplier qualification and why that might be one of the most important areas, maybe anything regarding misconceptions in the cannabis industry, but what that means. And yeah, just tell us about supplier qualification, the importance of it from your lens.
I think, and it's not just cannabis, I think every industry overlooks supplier qualification because it's so easy to maybe have one supplier, and you might qualify one supplier, but forget that maybe that supplier might run out. And, I ran into this so much, especially during the pandemic, where the company I worked for had one supplier, and then maybe it was overseas, and there was the issue with getting the issue getting the boats overseas, and everything got held up, and then there were the railroad issues. It's so important to have approved suppliers, not only so that you know what you're getting, but also have more than one approved supplier because of what happened. And back before the pandemic, it wasn't an issue. We never ran into that, or at least I didn't always run into that in my industries that I worked, or at least with the companies I worked with. And then the pandemic hit, and we were in uncharted territory. We ran into things that we'd never seen before. So I think it's important to not only have approved suppliers so you know what you're getting, but have more than one approved supplier for the same product, so that if you can't get what you need, you have someone else to fall on. There was one time when I worked for a food manufacturer, I was doing a trial for rice. This was our approved supplier, and it's kind of two lessons in one. We had one supplier. They were sending over these totes of rice for us to watch while they were going to clean them, and they sent over, we were watching it, they were cleaning them, and they sent over 4 totes from Thailand, and it was all their floor sweepings. And this was our only approved supplier for this. So number one, that's why you label your waste. But number two, this is why you have more than one supplier, because this was what we got, and now we had to have more products sent over from Thailand, which takes a long time. So, and I think when you do your approved suppliers, it's important to vet them first. If you can, potentially go audit them so that you can see what you're getting. And number three, make sure you have a good relationship with them, so that if something goes wrong, you can have an honest conversation with them and talk about what went wrong, and make sure you have a contract with them, so that you can also have in that contract what you expect when something goes wrong, how you get your product returned, what you expect as far as a corrective action. You want a root cause, you want an actual written corrective action, how many days you expect that corrective action to be returned to you, because otherwise you have no leg to stand on. They don't have to do anything if you don't have a contract.
Yep.
So,
well said. I mean, if I were to summarize what I just heard, and Kim, I want to make sure you get if you have anything to add, but we're talking about due diligence, right? We're talking about risk mitigation, whether it's, I don't have a second supplier. What happens if my main supplier falls through? If that's a critical ingredient, you can't produce your product, right? You're scrambling, and that it's when people are put into those stressful situations, whether it's as an individual or as a business, that mistakes happen, and bad things happen. And so you want to mitigate that. It's business continuity. It's planning ahead and hedging your bets, and then having documentation for, let's think about if something does go wrong, because life happens. What are the implications? What are the corrective actions? What are the terms and conditions? Instead of, now something actually happened and I'm not getting what I promised and I have no recourse. Kim, go ahead.
Yeah, we ran into big issues with this back in the day when in Colorado, they only allowed vertically integrated companies. And if a company had an outbreak of something, in their grow, and they had to destroy all those plants, or there was a pesticide issue and they had to destroy all those plants, they had to wait for the new ones to grow before they could use anything, right? So you couldn't get stuff from other people. It was like really crazy. Now, obviously, that's not an issue in other places, but that happens a lot where you have a supplier and you're buying only this one type of cannabis, and then something goes wrong, and then you don't have that supplier. And verifying your suppliers, right? We have an approved supplier program in GMP that is absolutely required. And we run into this I run into this almost every audit I do. I find something that is non-food grade that people are trying to put in a food grade product, right? Whether it be aromatic essential oils, right? That is like a huge one for some people. For some reason, people want to put essential oils in tinctures, make them smell and taste good. But if they're not made in a food grade facility, they could have really harmful toxins in them, including many pesticides, because if you get, and this happens with terpenes too, alpha pinene that comes from a pine tree factory uses myclobutanol, which is a really toxic carcinogenic pesticide that you shouldn't be ingesting in any way, shape, or form. Well, in small amounts, I guess you can. I mean, it's on a lot of things, but it's an ornamental plant and not made for human consumption. So we run into this a lot where it's like, okay, you can't just do this. And then I always, I have so many horror stories, but the person with CBD isolate in a Ziploc bag that takes it into a donut shop, and they say, hey, you want to put CBD in your donuts? Here you go. And there's no label, and there's no, where is it being made? I mean, this literally is something I did a recall for, because I was like, so where'd you get this CBD? Oh, some friend of mine that is a regular brought it in. And so I decided to put it in my donut. I mean, anything could have been in that baggie. It was literally a Ziploc bag with white powder in it. Like, it was terrifying. I was like, this could have been cocaine. This could have been, Ajax, this could have been anything. And you just put it in your, donuts. And that kind of stuff happens all the time, where people just don't think about it. Like, because they don't want to think people are, putting bad things. But if something isn't made for food or meant for a certain thing, then shouldn't be approved. We run into it all the time. We go through everything that our clients put in their products, and we have to look into this one. We have to look into this one, because a lot of times they're buying stuff really cheap overseas, or, buying really expensive stuff that isn't supposed to be in food or in cannabis products. So just kind of depends.
Yep. I think we could go on about this for probably at least another hour just on this topic alone. And I would love to, but I want to be mindful we're a few minutes over for everybody that's, especially on the East Coast, maybe done with happy hour and getting into, dinner or the evening. But just one quick note on that, I can't help myself, but you mentioned, this importance of, leaving no stone unturned, as you mentioned there, Kim, with like supplier and due diligence of ingredients. Something that I actually was made aware of more recently is that, folks assume, I've heard a lot of folks assume, oh, if it's medical grade, that must be a higher tier than food. And that is not the case at all, especially with a lot of, whether it's CO2 medical versus food grade, or, solvents, because of the amount of, without diving too deep into it, the amount the permitted daily exposure and the amount used. If you're carbonating a beverage, CO2 has to have a quite different level of purity than if it's used in a medical grade application for actual like production of a final product. So you can't just assume, oh, it's food or grass or medical grade and it's going to be fine. You really have to dig deep into that, and that requires really having that set of experts that understand and know how to dig deeper into the the C of A's and the supplier specifications. So, but it's so important. If you don't do that, you've got serious consumer risks, if not at least to your brand, and nobody wants that. So well, with that, any final thoughts that either of you want to share before we wrap up on this topic? I hope we kind of got the message across here of how important this is, how it is achievable, culture of quality, do it incrementally. Kim, obviously you and the Allay ladies, I'm so excited to continue to partner with you all. You are rock stars that, as you said, you'll leave no stone unturned. Come call Kim and the Allay team to get help if you don't already have an Emily on hand and your team, and maybe even if you do have an Emily on hand, you can always have an extra set of eyes. It's so important. Any final words before we wrap up here? Awesome.
I don't think so. I think we're over. So but thank you all for coming. We really appreciate it. It was really fun. Emily, thank you for joining me.
Thank you. It was great talking with you, Kim and David.
Yeah, you guys are awesome. And thank you for attending attendees. stay tuned for our next episode, which will be in May. We will send information around and an email recap. And of course, you can watch this and all of our other episodes online. So have a great day, and I'll see you all soon.